Ryan stared intently at the computer monitor, unmoving. His restaurant had only been open for a month. The business was just starting to pick up, and hiring professional security or surveillance services was out of the question for now. He knew employees could cause losses, some more than others. Often it started with petty theft, but there could be many reasons. One thing was certain: his restaurant couldn't afford this. Opening the place had been a dream he'd saved for over many years, and now that it had finally started to flourish, actually surpassing his expectations, he found himself glued to the screen, watching as the dishwasher dragged a large bag toward the exit. The security cameras, installed just 3 days ago, had already confirmed his growing suspicions. Had she been stealing all month? He had to put a stop to it immediately. The dishwasher, a young and seemingly modest girl named Emma, hadn't drawn any special attention before. But if his suspicions were right, her ability to go unnoticed was remarkable. There were still 30 minutes until closing, and Ryan decided he would confront her personally. The restaurant was only 3 blocks from his home, 5 minutes by car. He arrived early, parked discreetly, and turned off his headlights, keeping a close eye on the staff entrance. Meanwhile, Emma adjusted her work cap and exhaled softly. "Just one more day. You did great, baby girl. Hang in there. We'll be home soon." She checked the bag again. The ventilation holes were open, making it easier for Angelina to breathe. Half an hour earlier, Emma had fed her little daughter, now peacefully sleeping inside the makeshift carrier. Emma knew what she was doing was completely against the rules. If anyone found out she was bringing her baby to work, child services would be on her doorstep in a heartbeat. But she had no choice. When Angelina turned just a month old, Emma's breast milk had dried up. Stress and exhaustion had taken their toll. A neighbor sometimes agreed to babysit, but no more than twice a week, and even then, it cost her hours of cleaning in return. Formula, diapers, utilities, government assistance barely covered a fraction of the expenses. This job washing dishes at a newly opened restaurant had been a lifesaver. The spacious supply room, where no one but her ever entered, turned into the perfect spot for a tiny crib tucked between racks of clean dishes. Emma kept everything spotless, doing her best to hide her unconventional arrangement, but today her luck ran out. Emma quietly closed the door, slung the bag over her shoulder, and turned, only to find herself face to face with Ryan. "Oh!" she gasped, dropping the bag. "Oh!" he echoed, mimicking her startled tone. "Let's see what you've got there." Emma stepped forward, placing herself between him and the fallen bag. "I've never stolen anything. How dare you accuse me?" "I'm ashamed," Ryan said with a hint of sarcasm, his expression quickly turning serious. "Show me what's inside, or I'm calling the police." She tried to explain, but at that moment the bag twitched slightly. Emma exhaled, dropped to her knees, and unzipped it. Ryan recoiled slightly when he saw a tiny baby girl sleeping soundly among the rolled-up blankets. "A baby? Is she yours? You're working with an infant." Emma held her daughter close. "So I'm fired." There was no reply. Ryan, clearly stunned, said only, "Get in the car. I'll drive you home." "It's nearby, just around the corner," she murmured. He insisted, and a few minutes later they were standing at her apartment door. Emma hesitated but invited him in. She figured politeness required at least offering him some tea. Ryan made himself comfortable quickly, brewed the tea, and casually observed her modest apartment. When Emma returned after putting her daughter to sleep, she finally allowed herself to relax. Her nerves gave out, and she burst into tears. "Oh, God, what am I supposed to do now?" Ryan sat across from her, pushing the cup of tea closer. "Start from the beginning," he said. Emma began talking. At first it was brief, then the words poured out. She spoke of the struggles, of being left alone with a baby, of trying to make it work. Ryan listened silently, heart tightening as he heard the pain in her voice. He knew all too well what injustice felt like. After a long pause, he finally said, "Take a couple of days off. I'll handle things, then we'll figure out what to do next." When he left her apartment, he quietly placed a few bills on the table. Emma noticed them only after locking the door behind him. She stared at the money for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The next day, when Angelina came down with a fever, Emma had no choice but to break one of the bills. She went to the pharmacy, bought the medicine, and came home to find unexpected guests waiting inside. Emma stood frozen in the doorway of her apartment, staring at the uninvited guests. Their smug smiles and threatening glances pushed her instantly into a corner, 2 men and a woman casually laying out papers on her kitchen table. "So, have you thought about it?" asked one of the men, narrowing his eyes. Emma clenched her fists, summoning every ounce of her fragile courage. "I already told you. Number, I'm not selling my apartment. Get out." The man laughed as if she'd just told a joke. "Girl, you don't understand who you're dealing with. You gonna call the cops?" "Go ahead. We'll enjoy the show, but think about your baby. You've thought of her, right?" The words hit harder than a slap. They knew where to strike. The fear for Angelina surged like a wave through Emma's chest. She stayed silent, trying to keep herself standing. Then the woman with the documents stepped in, calmly stacking the papers. "The longer you wait, the cheaper that little apartment of yours becomes. Think about it, honey. Better to take the money now than lose everything later." Emma gave a bitter laugh. "What are you offering me? The price of a bathroom in the next building over?" Her sarcasm didn't go unnoticed. The man took a step forward, looming over her. "In a few days the offer will be lower, and you'll take it." Emma backed up until her spine hit the wall. Panic burned her nerves, but she refused to show weakness. The man reached toward her shoulder and suddenly dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. Behind him stood Ryan. "Anyone else want to talk about bathroom prices?" he asked coldly, his eyes scanning the rest. The intruders froze, shooting nervous glances at each other before quickly leaving the apartment, a heavy silence falling in their wake. Emma remained still, overwhelmed. "Why didn't you tell me they came before?" Ryan stepped closer, stopping when he saw the fear on her face. I thought they wouldn't come back," she whispered. Her voice was so small, so exhausted, it made something twist in Ryan's chest. He knew exactly what it felt like to be powerless in the face of danger. Memories of his own childhood with alcoholic parents surfaced, making him clench his fists unconsciously. "Pack your things," he said abruptly. "What? Where?" "You're coming with me." His tone allowed no argument, but Emma still tried. "That's not right. I can't just—" "You can, and you will. Those people won't stop. If you don't want anything to happen to you or Angelina, we need to act now." Emma didn't argue further. She quietly started gathering her things. 15 minutes later, they were stepping out of the apartment. A nosy neighbor peeked from her door, eyeing Ryan with obvious curiosity. "Well, look who showed up. Guess I won't be babysitting anymore, and no more cleaning for me either." Ryan turned to her, flashing a sweet smile so sharp the woman slammed the door shut. "What a piece of work," she muttered behind the door, adjusting her robe. "Still, maybe that's for the best. Young folks these days, best not to get involved." Angelina looked around the new place with wide, curious eyes. Ryan's apartment was bright and spacious, an entirely different world. "It's beautiful here," Emma said quietly, unsure of how else to start the conversation. "Now it is. You should have seen it when I bought it. Bare concrete walls, everything broken. I redid everything from scratch." He opened one of the doors. "This'll be your room." Emma peeked inside and saw a man's robe, slippers by the bed, and a stack of books on the nightstand. "But this is your room." "Don't be formal with me. At work we might keep it professional, but this is home. You two are staying here. I'll take the other room." Emma tried to protest, but he just waved her off. "The only downside? I'll be sleeping on the ceiling. Everything else is fine." And with that, he disappeared, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The room was warm and cozy, but it was hard for Emma to wrap her mind around the fact that they were finally safe. She quickly unpacked, fed Angelina, then wandered into the kitchen, only to find a mountain of dirty dishes and an empty fridge. Looks like coffee's the only thing he lives on. She chuckled, rolling up her sleeves. An hour later, the kitchen was clean, the fridge stocked, and the smell of fresh homemade burgers filled the air. Emma smiled at her daughter, who lay peacefully on the couch. When Ryan returned, surprise quickly turned into hungry delight. "You're amazing," he said, breathing in the aroma. "By the way, I have a surprise for you." Emma stepped into the hallway and froze. A brand new crib, a stroller, bags filled with baby clothes, all neatly stacked. This is for us." "Of course it is." "But how could I ever pay for this?" "Who said anything about paying?" he replied with a disarming smile. That night, Emma lay awake for hours. Angelina slept soundly beside her, but Emma's mind was restless, turning over Ryan's words again and again. Why is he doing all this? How could she ever repay him? The next morning, over breakfast, Ryan suddenly said, "We need to get married." Emma froze, fork falling from her hand. "What? You heard me. We need to get married. You need protection. Angelina needs a father." She looked at him wide-eyed, unsure whether to laugh or cry. But instead of answering, she leaned over the table and kissed him. Ryan was caught off guard, but quickly recovered. "Well," he muttered, leaning back, "I guess that's a yes?" He felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. That kiss changed everything, like someone had turned off reason and turned on something stronger. He wanted to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. "Are you sure?" he finally breathed. Emma blushed, realizing what she had done. She pulled away, avoiding his gaze. "Sorry. I don't know why I did that." "Why?" Ryan chuckled, though his laugh held no real humor. "I'm the one who proposed. Maybe I should be apologizing." She looked overwhelmed, as if the word marriage had only now fully registered. "This is a joke, right?" "No." Ryan put down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Angelina needs a father. And if you think I'm just doing this out of pity, you're wrong." Emma nervously clutched her coffee cup, avoiding his eyes. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "We're so different. You'll regret this. I know you will." Ryan cut her off. "I know enough. I know you're strong. I know you'd do anything for your daughter. And what about me? You think I'm okay knowing you're out there unprotected?" "This isn't your responsibility," she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. Ryan leaned back, folding his arms. His calmness only irritated her more. "I'm not leaving you. Get used to it." Emma stood from the table, unsure where she was even going. Anger, fear, and guilt boiled inside her. It was too much, too fast. She walked to the window, staring at the overcast sky. "You think it's that easy, don't you?" Her voice trembled. "You say you'll marry me, and everything just magically works out. You have no idea what I've been through." Ryan followed and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not trying to pressure you. If you need time, I'll wait. But you have to understand, I'm not here to play hero. I'm here because you matter to me." She turned to face him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Why? Why are you doing all this for me? I'm just someone who deserves to be happy," he said, finishing her sentence. "And your little girl deserves to be safe." Emma didn't respond. Her mind was a whirlwind. But somewhere in that chaos, a small spark of hope had begun to flicker. Days passed, and with them, Emma's tightly wound nerves began to ease, slowly giving way to a cautious sense of attachment. Ryan never pushed her. He didn't bring up marriage again, didn't try to force conversations she wasn't ready for, didn't invade her space. But his presence was constant, felt in everything. From the groceries he picked up so she wouldn't have to carry heavy bags with a baby on her hip, to the way he instinctively took over when Angelina got fussy, to the way he sat quietly beside her when all she needed was someone to be there while she cried. She didn't know what to call what was forming between them, but it was unlike anything she had ever known. And yet, her past still clung to her like a shadow that wouldn't let go. One evening, When Angelina had finally fallen asleep after a long and restless night, Emma sat curled up on the couch, nervously twisting a worn baby toy in her hands. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge. That's when the doorbell rang. Her heart leapt into her throat. Instinctively, she clutched the toy tighter. Ryan looked up from the phone in his hands, his face instantly serious. He signaled her to stay put, then moved swiftly to the door. "Who is it?" he asked firmly. "It's the police. We're here about your report," came a confident voice from the other side. Opening the door cautiously, Ryan saw two officers in uniform. One held up a badge, and the other began to speak with an air of finality that brought a wave of relief before the words even finished leaving his mouth. "We've taken the suspects into custody, the ones who threatened your friend. We have signed statements confirming they attempted to carry out a fraudulent real estate scam. The case is now moving to prosecution. She and her daughter are no longer in danger." Emma emerged slowly from the hallway, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's true? They won't come back?" The officer nodded. "You're safe now. There's nothing more to worry about." As the door closed behind them and their footsteps disappeared down the hall, Emma collapsed onto the couch, wrapping her arms protectively around her sleeping daughter. Her shoulders trembled, and Ryan could see the tears falling freely. He sat down beside her silently and pulled her into a gentle embrace. "I'm just so tired of being scared," she whispered against his chest. He ran his hand softly over her hair, holding her close as though he could absorb the weight of her fear just by being near. "It's over," he murmured. "I promise you, it's over." Emma pulled back just enough to look at him. Her expression was raw, her face streaked with tears, but there was something else in her eyes now. Confusion, gratitude, and a question she couldn't quite bring herself to ask. "Why do you care so much about me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You don't even really know me. We hardly—" Ryan smiled, gently taking her hand in his. "And what if I told you I just needed an excuse to be close to you? Would you believe that?" She stared at him for a moment, her lips parting slightly, then nodded. "I'd believe it." Weeks passed. Life started to take on a new rhythm, one Emma had almost forgotten existed. The fear no longer followed her into every room. She still lived in Ryan's apartment, but it didn't feel like she was imposing anymore. It felt like home. Angelina adored him, squealing with delight whenever he lifted her high into the air or tickled her belly. Ryan had a way with her that seemed almost natural, as if he'd been born to be a father. Emma sometimes caught herself watching the two of them and wondering what twist of fate had led her to this unexpected peace. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Ryan reached across and handed her a small envelope. Emma gave him a curious glance. "What's this?" "Just open it," he said, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. Inside were papers, official documents. It took her a few seconds to understand what she was looking at. Her breath caught in her throat. This is my apartment?" "Your apartment," he confirmed. "It's protected now. I worked with a good attorney. It's yours, legally and securely. No one can take it from you again." Emma looked up at him, stunned. "Why would you do that? After everything?" Ryan reached for her hand again, his eyes holding hers with quiet intensity. "Because I want you to feel safe. Because I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. And because I love you, Emma." Her tears returned then, but they weren't tears of fear or desperation. They were warm and quiet, like spring rain washing away the last traces of a long winter. She turned her hand over and laced her fingers through his. "I love you too," she whispered. In that moment, the past didn't matter anymore. All the broken pieces were still there, but now they fit together in a new way. Together, they made something whole, something that felt like a beginning. The morning after that quiet, shared confession, everything felt different. The sun seemed to shine a little warmer through the windows, and the air in Ryan's apartment carried a gentle calm, as if the very walls had absorbed the new peace between them. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma woke not with dread weighing down her chest, but with a light flutter of anticipation. She sat at the table, sipping her tea slowly, watching Angelina babble happily in her high chair while Ryan prepared breakfast, his movements calm, confident, familiar. It was a version of normal Emma had never known before, and yet it felt so right. Angelina reached for a spoon and accidentally knocked over her juice. Emma instinctively moved to clean it up, but Ryan was already there, wiping the tray with a smile. "Messy, messy girl," he murmured, and Angelina giggled in response. Emma caught herself smiling too, just for a moment, just because it felt good. But the moment didn't last. Around noon, Ryan received a call. The second he answered, Emma noticed a shift in his posture. His back straightened, his jaw tensed, and the warmth vanished from his face. He stepped into the hallway to finish the conversation, but even from the kitchen, Emma could hear the clipped tone in his voice. When he returned, his expression was hard. "I have to go to the restaurant," he said shortly, grabbing his coat. "Something's wrong." Emma's chest tightened. "Is it those people again? The ones who came after me?" "No," Ryan said firmly, but his tone was edged with unease. "I don't think so, but listen, just in case. If anything happens, if anyone strange shows up here, you call me, or the police. Immediately." Emma nodded silently, her hands curling around her mug for reassurance. After he left, the silence in the apartment turned heavy again. She sat by Angelina, trying to stay calm, but her mind spun with images of danger, scenes where Ryan didn't come back, or where her past somehow managed to reach out and pull him down too. She hated the thought that her problems might be infecting the only stable thing in her life. At the restaurant, Ryan arrived to chaos. The kitchen was disorganized, the staff confused, and the front-of-house manager was pacing in small, sharp circles. The usually unshakable bookkeeper stood silently by the office desk, a stack of reports in his hands and a grim look on his face. "We're missing nearly 40% of the revenue from the past week," he said quietly, laying the documents out. "And look at this, gaps in the digital logs, like someone's been erasing transactions." Ryan flipped through the papers quickly. The numbers didn't lie. This wasn't a case of simple mistakes. Someone had been siphoning money from under his nose and doing it smartly. His jaw tightened. Whoever it was had known how to cover their tracks. Almost. "Any suspects?" Ryan asked, though he already had his doubts. The manager hesitated. "Honestly, it looks like someone internal and new." Ryan took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility pressing hard against his shoulders. His restaurant wasn't just a business, it was the result of years of sacrifice. Blood, sweat, and long nights had gone into this dream. He wasn't about to let it fall apart. "Shut down the registers for the rest of the day," he ordered. "We're doing a full audit tomorrow." But he knew that wouldn't be enough. That night, when Ryan finally returned home, the exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. Emma met him at the door, visibly worried. Her first question was simple and quiet. "What happened?" He tried to soften the blow as much as he could, but the facts were too serious to hide. "We're being robbed, not with a gun, but from inside. Quietly, over time." Her face fell. "Do you think, could it be because of me? Because of the people who came after me?" Ryan looked at her sharply, almost hurt. "Number. And don't say that again. You're not the cause of this. If anything, they're connected. But this is someone else's game, someone playing dirty." Emma stared at the floor, guilt knotting her stomach. "Maybe I should leave." The words cut through the room like ice. "What did you just say?" Ryan's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "This is all getting out of hand. If I hadn't been here, if I hadn't brought my mess into your life—" "If you hadn't," he interrupted, stepping closer. "Emma, stop. No one's going anywhere. We'll deal with this, together." Tears stung her eyes, but this time they didn't fall. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The following day, Ryan buried himself in work. He reviewed every camera feed, scanned every line of code in the digital logs, examined every shift schedule. He refused to be blindsided again, and finally, after hours of cross-referencing footage and timestamps, he saw something. A young server, barely out of college, lingered far too often around the cash registers long after his shift ended. Ryan played the footage again and again. It all started to make sense. That evening he pulled the server aside. The kid looked nervous the moment Ryan called his name. "You were in the back room near the register last night," Ryan began calmly. "Want to tell me why?" "What? Me?" the boy stammered, but his hands were shaking. "I was just cleaning up." "I've seen the footage. Are you sure you want to keep lying?" There was a long silence. Then the truth spilled out. The boy confessed, stumbling over his words. He had been approached by someone, by a third party. They promised him money if he helped cover up small missing amounts each night. At first it had seemed harmless, but now it had spiraled. And the people behind it? Ryan recognized the names immediately. They were the same ones who had threatened Emma. That connection lit a fire in Ryan's chest, not just anger, but something deeper. These people hadn't just tried to take advantage of Emma's vulnerability. Now they were trying to destroy what he had built too. Driving home that night, Ryan couldn't stop thinking. For the first time in a long while, he felt something close to fear. Not for himself, but for the life they were starting to build. He was used to pressure, to hard choices. But the thought of failing Emma and Angelina, of not being able to keep them safe, left him cold. When he stepped into the apartment, Emma was waiting. She could read his face before he even spoke. "It was them, wasn't it?" she asked, stepping closer. He nodded. "Through someone else. A kid they roped into it." She stared at him, her lips trembling. "What do we do now?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her, at the worry in her eyes, the strength it took just to keep going, and then his expression softened. "We figure it out," he said. "We fight back." This time, she believed him completely. Evening settled over the city like a heavy blanket, the kind of night where even the wind seemed to whisper secrets through the cracks in the windows. Inside Ryan's apartment, a fragile quiet filled the space. Emma sat curled up in the armchair, her daughter asleep in her arms, the weight of the day pressing against her bones. The small living room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp and the occasional flicker of headlights passing below the building. In the other room, Ryan sat with his phone, trying to focus, to piece together the puzzle of what had happened, of who exactly was behind the theft, the threats, and how far their reach might extend. But no matter how many scenarios he played out in his mind, one thought kept rising to the surface. He couldn't let anything happen to them. Then a knock. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to make Ryan's body go rigid. He stood immediately, gave Emma a firm gesture to stay where she was, and walked quietly to the door. "Who is it?" "Police. We're following up on your recent report." He opened the door carefully, eyes scanning, muscles tense, until he saw the two officers in uniform. One flashed his badge, the other already launching into the reason for their visit. Ryan listened closely. "We've detained the individuals linked to your complaint," the officer said. Witnesses came forward. Their operation involved multiple attempts to coerce tenants into selling their homes below market value using threats and intimidation. It's going to trial now. Emma stepped into the hallway, disbelief etched across her face. "You're saying they're really gone?" "They won't be bothering you again, ma'am," the other officer assured gently. "You're safe." The words hit like a release valve opening after months of pressure. When the door finally closed behind the officers, Emma all but collapsed onto the couch, clutching Angelina to her chest. The baby stirred but didn't wake, and Emma's shoulders began to shake, silent, uncontrollable sobs as the stress that had been her constant companion finally spilled over. Ryan knelt beside her, not saying anything, just wrapping his arms around her and letting her cry. "I've been scared for so long," she whispered between broken breaths, "always looking over my shoulder, wondering when something would go wrong, wondering how I would keep her safe." You don't have to do that alone anymore, Ryan said, his voice steady and quiet. You're not alone, not ever again. She lifted her head to look at him, eyes red, but searching for some sign that this was really happening. But why me? She asked. You didn't have to do any of this. You don't owe me anything. We're basically strangers. Ryan smiled, but there was sadness behind it. He took her hand, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. I don't need years to know who you are. I've seen enough to know your strength, how much you've sacrificed for your child. And I care about you, more than I thought possible. Emma didn't answer right away. She was afraid to trust it, afraid to believe in something that seemed too good, too generous, too steady. But sitting there in his arms, in a quiet apartment with her daughter safe and warm, she finally allowed herself to feel it. Hope. Real, living hope. The weeks that followed weren't perfect, but they were theirs. Life started to settle into a rhythm that felt like stability. Emma still had her worries, her scars, and her doubts, but they began to soften in the light of her new normal. Ryan never once brought up the topic of marriage again, never pressured, never implied expectation. Instead, he showed her love in 100 small ways. A stocked fridge, taking the night shift with the baby when she had a headache, listening without judgment, holding her when the memories tried to claw their way back into her chest. Angelina adored him. She lit up every time he entered the room, giggling with abandon when he made silly faces or swung her gently in his arms. Emma would sometimes pause mid-task, folding laundry, wiping the counters, just to watch them together. And every time her chest ached in the best way. How had this become her life? Then, one evening, when the baby had gone to sleep early and the apartment was bathed in that familiar soft light, Emma sat across from Ryan at the kitchen table, both of them nursing mugs of tea. The day had been ordinary in the most beautiful sense, and then she spoke. Maybe your idea about marriage wasn't so crazy after all. Ryan looked up, eyes locking with hers. There was a flicker of surprise, followed quickly by something deeper, something patient and bright. You serious? Emma smiled softly, her cheeks warm with a mix of nerves and joy. Serious. Just maybe not tomorrow? Ryan laughed then, really laughed, head tilted back, free and full and completely without weight. Deal, he said. Tomorrow we'll just make pancakes. She rolled her eyes, but the laughter caught her too. And for the first time, the idea of a future, of rings and vows and promises spoken aloud, didn't terrify her. It felt like a door opening, like something she got to choose, something she deserved. The next morning, everything seemed a little brighter. The city outside Ryan's window hummed with its usual rhythm, but inside the apartment, a quiet kind of anticipation lingered. Emma woke slowly, not from fear or a child's cries, but from the warmth of sunlight spilling across the bed. She turned her head and saw Angelina already in Ryan's arms, the baby squealing with joy as he bounced her gently and spoke to her in a goofy voice. It was a scene so simple, so pure, that Emma felt her eyes sting with tears she didn't quite understand. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. It was better. That morning passed gently. They made pancakes, thick and buttery, just like Ryan promised, and shared them around the small table, taking turns feeding the baby and laughing at her messy enthusiasm. For a few hours it was just that, light, warmth, and the kind of peace that lives in ordinary moments. But peace, as they were learning, can be fragile. Sometime after noon, Ryan received another call. His face changed before he even answered. Emma knew immediately that something was wrong. He excused himself and took the call in the hallway, his voice low, clipped. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. I have to go to the restaurant, he said. There's been something. Emma's stomach dropped. Is it because of those people? Did they threaten you again? Ryan shook his head but didn't explain. Number, I don't think so. But I need to go check on something. If anything feels off here, anything at all, you call me or the police. Promise me. She nodded, trying to hide how much fear clawed its way back up her spine. After he left, she sat quietly by the window, her daughter playing on the rug nearby. But her mind wouldn't rest. The old worries crept in like cold air under a door. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Ryan arrived to find everything tense. The kitchen was running, but just barely. The manager looked pale. The assistant accountant handed him a stack of reports, her hands shaking slightly. "There's more missing," she said quietly, "and we think we know who's behind it now." Ryan listened closely, reading through the details. The evidence was piling up fast, and it pointed towards something more dangerous than petty theft. The young server he'd confronted days ago had vanished. No calls, no messages, gone without a trace. But before he disappeared, he had left behind more clues, emails, names, connections. Ryan recognized one of the companies listed, another shell corporation tied to the same people who had tried to take Emma's apartment. His gut twisted. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. These people had latched onto his life, his business, his future. They weren't finished. And now, it was personal. That evening, when he returned home, Emma didn't need to ask. She could see it in his eyes. She held Angelina close and met him at the door. "Tell me." Ryan sighed, removing his jacket. "They're still pulling strings, through others, but it's the same group, the same tactics." She felt a fresh wave of guilt and panic. "Then I really should go. I'm making this worse for you." Ryan turned sharply. "Don't say that again. You're not leaving. You are not the cause. You're part of my life now, and I'm not backing down." Emma's throat tightened. There was so much love in the room and still so much fear. "So what now?" "We stay ahead of them," he said, "and we keep moving forward." And that's exactly what they did. The following days were filled with action. Ryan met with lawyers, secured the restaurant's finances, and turned over every file that pointed toward the fraud. He made statements to the police, tracked down other victims, and helped expose the scheme from the inside. Meanwhile, Emma stayed by his side, doing everything she could to keep life at home grounded, for him, for the baby, for herself. Then, one night, the doorbell rang again. Emma froze. Ryan went to the door with calm certainty. On the other side stood two uniformed officers. "We've arrested those responsible for the fraud and intimidation," the senior officer explained. "They're facing serious charges. Your testimony helped move the case forward." Emma stood behind Ryan, her hand resting on the back of his arm, listening to every word like a person who had spent her whole life waiting to exhale. And now, she could. After the police left, the apartment was silent again. Angelina slept soundly. Emma sat beside Ryan on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a blanket around her shoulders. Her head rested against his chest. "I'm not sure I believe it," she said, "that it's finally over." "It is," Ryan said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They're gone. You're safe. We're safe." She tilted her head up, her voice trembling with quiet vulnerability. "Why do you love me? I still don't understand." "Because you've survived so much and you still find ways to smile," he said simply. "Because you put your daughter before everything. Because I see who you are, even when you don't. And maybe because loving you makes me feel like the man I always hoped I could be." She didn't reply with words. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him, slow and certain. It wasn't like the first kiss, hurried and full of confusion. This one was an answer. Weeks passed again, and the world finally began to feel like it was standing still, in the best way. Emma's apartment was safe. Her daughter was thriving. The threats were gone. And Ryan was still there, not as a protector out of duty, but as a partner out of love. One crisp Saturday afternoon, as they shared lunch together, Ryan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another envelope. This time it was plain, with her name scrawled across the front. Emma raised an eyebrow. "More surprises?" "Just one," he said. Inside were official documents, title papers. Her apartment was now fully transferred into her name, legally fortified, insulated from any future manipulation. Her eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Ryan interrupted gently, "because now you don't have to look over your shoulder ever again." She stood slowly, walked to him, and took his hand in hers. "I love you," she whispered. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and pulled her close. "I love you too." And there, in the soft light of their home, with laughter waiting just outside the door and a future finally within reach, they understood something neither had ever dared to believe before. They were no longer surviving. They were finally living.